Good morning, everyone. I'd first like to say thank you to everyone who's wishing me and my recovery. It's been 3 weeks and I'm still struggling. It's hard to actually go down and work for a set period of time making a bow, because after 45 minutes, maybe an hour, I get winded just using a draw knife. Oh, hey, there's a deer and there's some turkeys surrounding me. I am surrounded by some of my favorite objects. A globe, which I like globes, and my 8-inch reflector, which is a really nice scope, by the way. Orion, a lot of bang for your buck at the Dobsonian mount. You see this fancy computer here, which doesn't work, but that's alright, because when that computer busted during an astronomy program I was doing, I was forced to go back to using the finder scope in my notes, and I never even bothered to fix it again, because part of the experience is using, in my case, Norton's Atlas to Celestial Stuff. I have to look at it to see the exact title, the Norton's Guide, with its charts. And my trusty old 4.5-inch Tosco reflector, which was given to me on my 18th birthday. Tosco is not known for its optics, but actually it has a pretty decent little equatorial mount, and when I threw away the Tosco eyepieces that came with it, and got on the internet and bought a couple Plossels, it's actually a decent scope. But anyway, this is about bows, and it's in relation to 2 comments I've had, or questions. One is by Ozark Wander. He was wondering about the number of bows that I make that break. Great question, Ozark Wanderer. And then a comment, and possibly a question, depending on, by Primitive Teen. Hey Prim, how's it going? And the first one, how many bows do I break? That's a complicated question to answer, because I make a wide range of things. And some of those bows are just made as experiments, as guinea pigs. Now, when you're beginning, let's say you've made 6 total bows, just pulling that number out of the air, 6 total bows, and 3 of them broke, and 3 of them worked. Whether or not they're lighter than you wish, or they had string follow, you had 3 working bows, your percentage is 50%. And that's huge. That's huge. Half of your bows are broken. After making, not bragging, just trying to come up with an estimate of how many bows I've made, hundreds, I don't know, 300, 600, who knows. If I get a certain number of bows that break and a lot of successes, then the percentage of broken bows to good bows are reasonable, and so I don't sweat it. I've gotten to the point, in all honesty, that if I'm making a bow for a customer and I spend time with it and it breaks, yes, I will be bothered. It's not the end of the world, it happens, but I will be bothered. If I'm just making a bow for myself, it is a guinea pig. I don't like wasting materials. Theoretically, 100% of your bows, we feel, should be great bows. But you learn from going out there and experimenting and failing as far as the bow's breaking. It's not a failure. Please don't think of it as a failure, as long as you learn something from it. And so do not be afeared, my friends, of breaking bows. Broken bows are not your enemy. Unless you are drawing down on something like turkey out there and the bow breaks and you lose it. In that world, then you can consider it a failure. But otherwise, when you're scraping wood and making bows and they break, don't let it get you down. Figure out why that bow broke. Well, I drew it back so far, so now I know that I was exceeding its limits. Or it was a maple bow that was, let's just say, narrow and deep. Well, for its length and its bend radius, make it a little wider. You have learned something. We learn through experience. When we were kids, we were walking along the ground and we fell down and skinned our knees or bumped our heads. That's all part of learning. As a unicycle rider, a trail rider on unicycles, you know, that goes along to bows. You will fall a certain amount of times before you can ride, and that's all part of it. And then you should feel as though you've achieved something after falling so many times. And looking back, I learned when I was in my 40s, so I didn't have the natural balance of like, and the fearlessness of a 12-year-old. And so it took me longer to learn how to ride. And so when I did learn how to ride, it felt great. It probably felt more great to me than if I had an easy time learning. So don't worry about your broken bows. If you're not making them, if you're not breaking them, you're not making them. Primitive Teen, on your suggestions to me regarding that video on the Osage bow. Indeed, my friend, that is a good thought as far as having a website like that and having customers be able to take designs and put it on there like you're building or designing like a new car. Exactly. Taking this feature, put it here, and then you can see it. Great idea. And then you also mentioned another bow maker, a great bow maker, who was drawing back a short Osage bow with thin rings and it broke. Exactly. The two pieces of an Osage log, a short Osage log I'm working on, very thin rings. In fact, one has thinner rings than the one I showed in the video. In one spot, it's 6 rings in a 1/4 inch, so they're paper thin. Paper thin. If I was to make an Osage bow and I'm going to like sit down here and work to my plan and say that this is going to be a great bow, then I would certainly work down to a thicker ring. The 2 staves I'm working on are practice staves. I do not believe, and again going to wasting wood, it's just they're 2 small sections of a large log that's thin ringed, or a short log. I misspeak so much because my mind still isn't right. Short log, and so I was able to split off a whole bunch of pieces of this, and I feel that it's worth, first, just scraping these things down a ring at a time, just to practice working down to a growth ring. You know, without getting it out of level. If this is a single growth ring, you can certainly taper it or have dips within that certain growth ring before going through to the next one. And so I'm just using these 2 pieces that have extremely thin growth rings that I would never consider making a bow and selling it out of these things, just as practice. So I've got them on my shaving horse, and I'm just working them through, practicing going through paper thin Osage rings. And yes, I could certainly work through them. I will eventually work through these paper thin rings and get to a thick ring, which would make them, you know, more viable bows. But in my current condition where I just don't have stamina to work on them, this is working for me. I'm able to practice going through the thin rings, and I may, one of those 2 bows, I may exactly make a finished bow out of it and draw back and see what happens. Because that's just how I function. I need to go into an area of study, whether or not it's like it, and I'm done. I have to be done with making comments on the flat earth thing. You know, basic map reading, map skills, you know, can you represent the earth on a flat surface and have a distance scale? You know, which one works? Even mapping the ocean floor. I gotta be done with it. The same thing goes with, you know, telescopes. I've seen, a friend of mine just pulled in, he's turning around. I've seen this video last night, the turkeys are going crazy, of this guy that proved that stars aren't real because he obviously had a poor quality telescope and forgot the focal length, like 1250 millimeters, and then put in a 6 millimeter eyepiece, which for a small telescope, you know, with an objective, he's surpassing the ability of that telescope as far as the magnification. 200 times magnification was the case with a small cheap telescope, of course you're not going to get good images. And he brought it out of focus and showed spherical aberrations, and it proved that, like, stars aren't real and they're in water. But I cleaned my mind out. After watching this, I went to some actual amateur astronomer sites, and I saw some brilliant and beautiful astrophotography, you know, with done by somebody that knows what they're talking about. I was a geology major. Do not allow me to convey a snobbery. Some of the smartest people I know never went to a university, so there is no, you're smart if you went to a university, you're not smart if you didn't. Forget that. Blow that out of the water. In fact, some of the dumbest people, I'm not going to go that route. But anyway, talking about plate tectonics and earthquakes and volcanism, how they prove that, like, that there is a flat Earth. You know, referencing other YouTube videos, going to USGS site and cherry-picking information to prove the fact that volcanism and earthquakes are proven by the flat Earth. Then I have to balance that by going to actual sites done by real researchers. You know, and that goes, in fact, you're probably wondering, John, why are you even talking about the flat Earth? It's so ridiculous. First of all, I stopped trying to convince people that the Earth isn't flat, because you're just not going to, because it's faith-based, not science-based. But it kind of goes into that whole scheme of Bose. I want to see how things break in order to teach myself how to make things that don't break. Alright, well, I am going to end this video with that. I appreciate your viewership. You know, I haven't been really making the videos lately, but my subscribership is rising, which is good. My book sales have kind of flatlined, but, you know, c'est la vie. Things go up and they go down. I guess I'll leave you with this one point. If you do check out, I'm sure that the people out there that are watching this have varied interests. You go from, like, bow making to how to make a fire with a hand drill, or a wooden boat building, or furniture building. You know, we have varied interests. We have varied interests. The one thing I can point to that's in my field of view here are two telescopes. Now this little jobby, an Orion 8-inch reflector, beautiful scope, and you can get it with or without this computer system, you know, and it's some hundreds of dollars. It's good value, you know, because it's really not expensive. Or you can watch these sites where they're getting into astrophotography, and they've got a $1,500 mount and a $2,000 telescope or more, you know, and that might convince you that astronomy is an expensive hobby. Well, it really doesn't have to be, because for a lot of years I relied on this little 4.5-inch telescope, and actually you just throw out the eyepieces and you can get a decent eyepiece to plug into your economical telescope, and you know, and it doesn't cost you a lot of money, and you don't need a computer. You don't even need an equatorial mount. This is kind of nice because you can have a motor on it so it tracks stuff, but again, if you're scanning and finding objects, you don't need an equatorial mount. You can have a Dobsonian, which is more or less like a sit and spin. And so you can get into astronomy, you know, for $150, $200, or even less, you know, if you shop around. Getting a decent telescope, if your eyepiece has an M on it, throw it away, and then look for a plossel that fits it. Doesn't need to be an expensive hobby to go out and try to track down the Messier objects, you know, or just look at M13 and Hercules, or double stars like Alberio and Cygnus. It's a beautiful hobby. I guess with that, I'll just leave it at that. Still trying to recover. I'm going to finish my coffee, maybe eat some breakfast, and then struggle away at making some bows. But for now, my friends, it's nice just to sit in the sunshine and watch the turkeys lurking around the yard. Yep.